I'm Marek Kapička. I'm the director of CERGE-EI, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's lecture and to introduce today's speaker, Paul Milgrom. Paul Milgrom is the LI Professor of Humanities and Sciences at Stanford University. He's also a professor at the Stanford School of Engineering and a senior fellow at the Stanford Institute for Economic Research. For many years, CERGE-EI had the pleasure of having Paul as a member of its executory and supervisory committee. Paul Milgrom has made many wide-ranging contributions to economics, including contributions to game theory, industrial organization, macroeconomics, and especially to the theory of market design. That is a theory of how to design markets so that they would meet the set of desirable objectives like efficiency. He has received many awards for his work. They are too numerous to list all here. Let me name a few. He's been named the Distinguished Fellow of the American Economic Association. He's received the Nobel Prize in 2008, and above all, he's received the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2020 for his contribution to the auction theory, together with Robert Wilson. Paul Milgrom has also led the way in showing how to use the theoretical insights in practice. He helped to design radio spectrum auctions for the FCC, Federal Communications Commissions. The auctions are used to allocate licenses to TV broadcasters, mobile service providers, and the like. He is also a founder of several companies, most recently Auctionomics, which helps clients choose the right strategies in high-stakes auctions. And Auctionomics, interestingly, has received a Technical Emmy Award in 2024 for his work on broadcast incentive auctions. Professor Milgrom's interest in market design is also the topic of today's lecture, in which he will talk about designing markets for surface waters. Professor Milgrom, the floor is yours.
Okay. Okay, thank you, everyone. Is this, oh no, here we go. Hello? Yeah, that's better. Thank you, everyone. Pleasure to be here. One of the awards you left out was today's award, right? So it's a pleasure to be here to receive an award from Charles University and to talk to you guys all today. I want to talk to you about creating water markets. This is a project that has both academic and commercial sides. The academic side is where I'm launching this project with Billy Ferguson and Buzz Thompson. Billy is a graduate student at Stanford, and Buzz is in the law school at Stanford, an environmentalist and an expert in water law. And we're trying to do something useful for our state and our economy. Famously, the American humorist Mark Twain spoke about water and said, whiskey is for drinking, water's for fighting over. Actually, the name river, I'm told, has the same root as the word rival, because it's just an ancient problem of fighting over water that might be available, for example, for irrigating fields. We hope to change that a little bit and make it that whiskey's for fighting over and water's for trading. We'll see exactly what the barriers are to that and why it hasn't happened yet, and what we might do to encourage that to happen. But first, as a matter of background, let me talk about some of the problems. Good. So there are, according to the sources that are cited here, 4 billion people face severe water scarcity at least 1 month every year. The global water demand is increasing. It'll be up by another 20 to 30% by 2050. While water availability is decreasing, we are running down our reservoirs at an unsustainable rate. The aquifers, half the world's aquifers are being continually being overdrawn. And there are estimated to be, by 2030, 700 million people that are displaced by intense water scarcity. So water is a problem worldwide. Solutions, well, historically, the main policy tool for dealing with water scarcity has been supply-side augmentation. We pump water from the ground, we build dams and build reservoirs in the hopes that we can have more water available for irrigation and for cities and so on. But globally, formal market-based allocation of water is uncommon, and even informal water markets are not very common. And that's a bit of a surprise because water is the availability of water varies by season and by year, and you might think that in periods when there are water shortages, the low-value uses, those who own the rights to low-value use would cut back and sell their rights to ones with high-value use, but that doesn't happen mostly in most of the world. One of the reasons for hope is that there are new technologies that are going to prove to be important in all of this. One of the reasons that, one of the barriers to water trading, I'll talk more about this a little later, this might seem unclear now, but one of the barriers to water trading is that real water usage is not well measured, has historically not been well measured. It's hard to trade things that you can't measure, so that's one barrier to trade. That, again, I expect some of you will find that surprising, but it'll become clearer a few slides from now. Demand reduction, there are new technologies for measurement and new technology for demand reduction. And if we manage to get markets going in water, that will encourage saving on water. You can imagine that you're a farmer and you have all the water you need. You have no reason to invest in water-saving technologies unless you can sell the water that you've saved. So the new technologies that are available that reduce water use are not going to become widespread until we're able to create effective markets for water. Okay, so let me talk about California for a moment, because that's where my current efforts are mostly focused. In California, well, California is an odd state. It was, the population grew rapidly after the discovery of gold in 1849, the famous 49ers in California. And the mining of gold, the people took water from the rivers and blasted rock on the mountainside and to try to harvest the gold that was there. And the rights were assigned initially to the first users, who, if there was water available and it wasn't already being claimed by somebody else for their use, you could become the first claimant and get rights for it. And those rights were absolute, more or less. You had the right to first use before anybody else could use that water. Now, the average annual quantity of water that's allocated in the California system is about 77.2 million acre feet. A million acre feet is the amount of water it takes to flood 1 acre to a depth of 1 foot. It varied in the period from 2014, well, between 2006 and 2014, those were peaks and troughs. You see the variation was between 61 million acre feet and 104 million acre feet. The average California household over the period of a year uses about 1/2 of an acre foot. Just give you some idea of what the magnitudes are. Nearly half of the water that can be allocated is allocated for environmental use to preserve flows in certain rivers and streams on behalf of various species. And 80% of the rest goes to agriculture, and that agricultural use is huge in California. It's a major agricultural state. The valleys in the states are semi-arid, but with the help of water that's taken from that's used to irrigate them, there's a $49 billion a year industry, big industry in agricultural products, which is sort of shown a bit on the right. Now, California has recently gone through a drought. We began this project about a year and a half ago, and you can see if you take a look at these pictures here, this was one of California's largest reservoirs, and normally it's full up to there, and in the drought years, as the reservoirs were drawn down, you can see what a tiny fraction of the water was left in that reservoir. The West in general, the western state has gone through, or had gone through, a mega drought that went approximately 10 years, the worst in more than 1,000 years. And you can get some picture of what's happening here that makes it urgent to try to economize or save water. Now, you might think, again, that during a drought, efficient reallocation of water would be especially valuable. Let me give you some idea. If you're an almond grower, if your crop is a tree crop, you can't stop watering the tree in drought years. The trees will die, and you lose a valuable asset. What you would expect to happen in a drought year is, for example, alfalfa growers would let some of their fields lie fallow that year. It's an annual crop. They can skip a year and pick it up the next year, and you'd expect water to be reallocated in that sort of way. During the severe drought year of 2015, less than 5% of water was reallocated through water transfers, which is a pretty tiny amount. What's shown in the graphs on the right are both the dollar value and the volume of water that was traded year by year in California. And what's shown in the gray, you see this gray mountain in the middle that shows the worst drought years in that period. And what you can see is that, yeah, maybe there's a little more trading in the drought years, but it's nothing dramatic. We don't see the kind of response through trading that you might expect to happen in an efficient market during drought years. The average water price was $620 per acre foot in 2015. The average price had been $277 per acre foot, so there was some price response. But to give you an idea of how dramatically inefficient water is allocated, commercial consumers in San Diego were paying in 2017 $2,500 per acre foot. Well, $2,491 as the number shows here. And farmers in the neighboring Imperial Valley were paying $20 an acre foot. Now, you might think if you could buy water at $20 an acre foot and sell it at $2,500 an acre foot, there'd be some trading going on. But no, the trading is blocked under California law for reasons that I'm going to try to explain to you next. Okay. Oh, and by the way, the other thing that was going on that sort of encouraged me to get started on this project, in April of 2023, just last year, the drought along the Colorado River had threatened the two huge reservoirs on that river, Lake Mead and Lake Powell. And the near-term environmental Colorado River operations, as you can see here, the Bureau of Reclamation, which runs these dams, wrote, this is a quote from their report, the potential impacts of low runoff conditions and in the remainder of the interim period until 2027 pose unacceptable risks to the routine operation of the Glen Canyon and Hoover dams. The risk is that the levels in those dams, in those lakes, has fallen so low that electricity production, by the Hoover Dam and the power it generates is the largest single electricity producer in the United States. And if the water falls below the level, there won't be enough water coming through the dam to continue the electricity generation. The dam would reach what's called dead pool, and there's an actual risk that if uses aren't changed, that dam could reach, the reservoir could reach dead pool. Therefore, modified operating guidelines need to be expeditiously developed. We need to find a way to economize on water, and that struggle is ongoing now. Now, the question that you might wonder is, well, if there is such a need, why doesn't the market take care of it? Why aren't people just trading water? If you're trained in economics, it's the first thought you would have. You might think that water was almost the perfect commodity, divisible, uniform, something like that might be your first thought. If that's what you're thinking, you'll learn to think again today. It's a little different than that. There are water markets in the world. Australia, after even longer and deeper drought, managed to change its water law. So we know that water markets are possible. Australia's Murray-Darling Basin has the most sophisticated water trading in the world, and it's believed that the increase in agricultural output was like avoiding a pretty major reduction in the overall water supply. We think that this combats climate change effects, and there are still some issues I won't focus on in the Murray-Darling Basin. But trading of water is possible. Farmers there have an app. They can trade water on their iPhone. They can, pick, I want to, release some of the water to which I'm entitled, and somebody downstream can buy from them, and it looks like a relatively simple exchange. But in California, water markets are dysfunctional. They don't work. And it can be explained by just ordinary economic analysis. There are externalities from trade, as I will show you. They're relatively large externalities. The property rights are diverse and outdated. It's not clear what's being traded. There are difficulties of measurement, which I've already hinted at, and I'll show you a little bit more about. And there are thin markets due to inadequate information. The market infrastructure is missing. Market infrastructure, the market could supply by itself if it weren't for the other problems. But these other problems are fundamental ones to creating effective markets. So I want to explain externalities because I think this is pretty fundamental. When you approach this naively, you might think of water as being like oil. Well, we can pump oil out of the ground and trade it. Why can't we pump water and trade it? And the reason has to do with externalities. So this is an example of, this is a real hydrological network from Northern California between Nevada County and Placer County over here. And what you're looking at, let's see if it, the red dots are the holders of rights, and the green arrows indicate diversions from streams or canals. So there's a point of diversion here at which water is taken by this farmer here and that farmer and the one over here. And the red arrows indicate the thing that distinguishes water from oil, return flows. If you are a farmer and you use, let's say, flood irrigation on your field, and you put 100 acre-feet of water down on your field, not all of it goes into the crops. Some of it evaporates. That's lost to other local users anyway. Some of it goes down into the ground where it helps recharge the aquifers. Some of it flows back into the streams where it can be used again by another farmer downfield. It can be as much as half of the water that a farmer is taking from a stream is able to be reused by another farmer because of these return flows, the flows down into the aquifers and back into the stream where it becomes a supply for others. So the additional red arrows here, so here this farmer is getting water from here on the stream, and it's supplying return flows to this stream, but also to that stream. And of course, exactly how these flows take place is something that has been mysterious to the farmers for a long time. It has to do with the hydrological structure. So the return flows are significant and have mostly been unknown as well. Okay, so users can return water to their original stream and to other streams too. So this farmer is an example of a farmer who is getting water from this point and returning it to that point and that point on two different streams, which are providing supplies for other farmers downstream on the two different streams. And of course, if that farmer were to take that water from the stream and say, I agree to sell it to a city and stick it in a pipe and set it off to a city, then the farmers downstream would be harmed. They would find that they were getting less flow in their streams, which they were relying on to irrigate their crops. Those are the kinds of externalities that can result from trade. Clear enough? Okay, so let's take a look at a numerical example to see how this might work. Let's see, I started at 5:30, I'm going to 6:30, right? Okay. So this is a simplified example that Billy created to show how this might work. Here's two streams that, small streams, they have 40 acre-feet or 40,000 acre-feet, as you like, that are coming down the streams. And the green arrows represent diversions. We have Alice, Bob, and Charlie, and they have diversion rights for 25, 20, and 45. And you can see, of course, there aren't 45 coming down the stream, and there's not 45 coming down that stream, so you might wonder how that works. Well, it works like this. Bob has evapotranspiration usage of just 10 acre-feet. That is, half of his 20 acre-feet either evaporate or are used up by transpiration into the plants. And Bob has the other 10 acre-feet that that is not involved in evapotranspiration. 5 of it flows to this stream, and 5 of it flows to that stream, and that 5 plus the remaining 20 creates the 25 of flow for Alice to use. And similarly, Charlie over here has the 40 flowing down this stream plus the other 5 from Bob's normal use, creating 45 for Charlie. So this hydrological network that users can return water to their original stream and to other streams too is part of what makes this whole system quite complicated. Okay, so what are the externalities from trade? Well, suppose that Alice values marginal water more than Bob and wants to buy 8 acre-feet from Bob. So Bob sends 8 acre-feet of water to Alice. Bob now, instead of diverting 20, diverts 12, and each of his return flows fall to 3. Alice can now divert, because Bob's diverting 8 less, Alice can now divert 31 acre-feet. 40 minus 8 is 32, plus 3. Oops, what happened there? 40 minus 12 is 28. Plus 3 is 31, so that's the 31 acre-feet for Alice, and 40 plus 3 is 43. Charlie can't get his 45, to which he is legally entitled now, and the law says Charlie's allowed to take 45, but this trade limits Charlie to taking 43. So in California, this trade would be legally blocked. Bob doesn't have the right to sell this water to Alice because Charlie has a right to take 45 acre-feet from the stream, and and that right is interfered with by this trade. Okay, the California Supreme Court has gotten involved in many of these issues, and this is a quote from a 1977 ruling of the court, which said that the scope and technical complexity of the issues concerning water resource management are unequaled by virtually any other type of activity presented to the courts. This stuff is really complicated, and the fights over it and over who has rights to how much and what the externalities are have been a barrier to the creation of markets. So earlier on, I mentioned to you that measurement was hard. Not every kind of measurement is hard. We could measure how much water was being taken from the stream, but not how much water the farmer was actually using, because some of that water was not actually being used, but flowing back to others who would use it later. Okay, so how could we get water markets going against that kind of background? So that, I hope, helps to explain why, well, one of the reasons at least why water markets are hard. Let me pause and just explain that there are others as well There are what economists call pecuniary externalities involved in water. I think I probably have this on a slide later. If you have a local farm community where farmers are growing their crops, in that local farm community, the local stores, the seed store, whoever sells fertilizer, the farm workers all depend on that crop, and they too can be harmed. There can be lower wages, less jobs, less business for people that results from these sorts of trades. The communities often regard that the farmers don't actually own the water. They use the water with the deference of the community is their idea. And if they were to try to sell that water, the community should have a right to object. So that's a very common view, different from the private property view that I was implicitly espousing a moment ago. Okay, so basically the kinds of challenges that we're looking at is that first, that shifting water use through trading can cause physical externalities, the kinds I've talked about. The actual use of water is hard to measure, and third-party impacts can be hard to assess because they depend on hydrology and that we don't have full knowledge of. Reducing waste use in a farming community can have pecuniary externalities. That's what I just described. Others in the community can be affected. And there is this philosophy that not everybody shares the economist's view about the benefits of markets and everything being a private good. Water is sometimes perceived as a public good, and that determines the character of the community and shouldn't be taken from a community unless something can be done to preserve its character. Okay, so these are all barriers to creating an effective market for water. And in Australia, it took a long and massive drought to break the resistance to water markets and create the new structure. Okay, this is one of the new technologies that I've pictured here. You can go to OpenET on the web, and OpenET is, ET stands for evapotranspiration. Evapotranspiration is the amount of water that either evaporates or transpires. Transpires means it's taken up in the plants and leaves through, for example, the leaves of the plants, water that's actually used up in the farming process. And I'm looking at an area in Northern California. This is the Coastal Range Mountains in California, and this is an area in the Central Valley of California. And each of these pixels, if you will, is the result of a satellite image which looks at how wet the fields are, or how much water has been put down into the fields at that moment. And so you can take any field in California and tell by satellite how much water is being used. And over here is a graph month by month of the water usage on this particular field that's where there's a circle around a field. And when I hovered my cursor over that field on this website, up pops the graph on the right that shows you the usage on that field over a period of time. We can get very fine measurement of actual water use, which is not perfect, but more nearly is something that adds up. The total water use is what is limited to the total flow, not the total diversions, which is part of what makes it hard to create those markets. So that's just a shot from the OpenET website. You can go yourself and run your cursor over it and find detailed information for the entire Western United States, and this could be expanded worldwide. Okay, now the ideas that I have about how water markets might be created are motivated, believe it or not, by radio spectrum. You can't think of two commodities that seem more different in their inherent physical characteristic, but after all, I'm an economic theorist, as all of you guys know, and it's the abstract characteristics that I've been focusing on trying to understand the nature of a solution. So the water market shares some characteristics with the TV broadcast spectrum used in the incentive auction. Let's see if I've got some of those here. The basic idea, what happened in the incentive auction is an auction that I led the design of for the Federal Communications Commission in the United States. The problem that we had in radio spectrum is there was a big part of spectrum with historic uses, broadcast television, and by the year 2010 or so on, 2011, when the government began considering this, the uses of over-the-air broadcast television was becoming less valuable. More and more people, in a trend that has continued, were watching either over the internet or through cable or through satellite and not through local over-the-air broadcast. So we needed to trade that spectrum, but any trades would involve, trade involving use would involve externalities, because you can't operate a television station adjacent in frequency space. If you imagine that replace geography by frequencies, if you try to operate a broadcast television adjacent to let's say broadband data communications, one or the other will interfere with the other. You can't, they leak interference into the adjacent frequencies, just as we don't like to have factories next to our houses. You don't like to have broadcast television next to mobile data. So one of the characteristics is that the changing conditions created conditions for profitable transfers of rights. We would like to transfer rights, we wanted to transfer rights from broadcast television to mobile broadband from a relatively low inefficient value crops to higher value crops and to urban areas and so on. Those especially during periods of drought, we'd like to be able to create these new uses. The rights might need to be converted or combined to avoid the externalities and promote new uses. I'm going to show you more about the broadcast incentive auction in a moment, so you can understand this in a little more detail. But television broadcast and moving from television broadcast to broadband and local irrigation versus urban consumption is this point. And the complexity, both of these things, in order to be done successfully, they're computationally complex, and they require interfering models. I'll show you frequency interference versus return flows. I will show you what we did about interference for broadband, and I'll speculate about what we can do with hydrological models to improve the use of water to create markets for water. And I'll show you in a moment how all of that operated. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears now and tell you about the reallocation of radio spectrum. This is a project that I led for the Federal Communications Commission. We originally had channels 14 to 51 in the United States were devoted to what's called ultra-high frequency UHF television. We took, it's now 14 to 37, channels 38 to 51 are now used. Instead, were cleared for use in 5G, basically, services. And it worked, this is, oh, I wonder if this is hooked up that you're going to be able to hear it. Okay, this is a sound hookup. I hope it's going to work. We'll see. This is a small video to give you the background on what was going on. By the way, in my introduction, it was mentioned that Auctionomics is going to win an Emmy Award. This is what we're winning for. This was considered a technical contribution to the television industry. And in October, I'm going to be in New York to receive an Emmy. An odd thing for an economist to do. Anyway, the analysis begins. So I'm imagining that the analysis in water begins with hydrological studies and evapotranspiration measurements. The analysis in radio spectrum began with this feasibility study where the locations of various television stations was observed. the areas of service were determined, and where broadcast interference. So if these two stations were both on the same channel, then this area in the Venn diagram here would be an area where they would they couldn't both be serving their customers in that area. There would be unacceptable interference. So we pixelated the United States into 10 million cells, 1 kilometer square, determined the signal strength of each TV station in each cell, determined when there would be, when a single station would be able to reach and serve a customer there, when having two stations there would create interference, and plotted the whole thing. That's what this first step was about. And the first step in the water thing will be a hydrological study that will help us, that will similarly help us. Then, oh, by the way, the rule was that if two stations were said to be not interfering if fewer than 0.5% of their customers suffered interference from the allocation. Then what we did is we created a graph, and in this graph, each node represents the location of a television station, and you draw an edge between two stations if they can't both be on the same channel without creating interference. So this is the interference graph that we created. And the nodes connected to this central red node here are colored this salmon color, and then the white nodes are nodes that are connected to the salmon colored nodes, and you end up with something that looks like that, which is pretty dense on the west coast and the whole eastern half of the United States, a dense graph of connections. There's about 130,000 of these edges, of these co-channel constraints as they're called. I'm not going to talk about the more detailed constraints. The problem is actually a bit harder than this because it wasn't a perfect fit for graph theory. But about 130,000 co-channel constraints. And if you limit yourself to these co-channel constraints, this is what's called a graph coloring problem. If you have a given set of channels available and you want to know, is it possible to put a certain set of broadcasters on the air, that's the same as asking, can I assign a channel to each node so that no two connected nodes are on the same channel? Replace the word channel by color, and you have a classic graph coloring problem. And the graph coloring problem is NP complete. If any of you have studied computational complexity in computer science, it means it's hard. It means, roughly speaking, that for any, well, it certainly means for any known algorithm, and perhaps, depending on a famous hypothesis, for any algorithm, the worst case solution times grow exponentially in the size of the problem. This is a big problem, 130,000 edges. You don't want to put 130,000 to an exponent of a number bigger than 1. It very quickly gets unreasonable. There are going to be problems in just checking the feasibility of which sets of stations we could leave on the air is going to be too hard for us to solve in the amount of time available. That's what this boiled down to. It's a technically complex problem. And so in the water application, among the things that we expect, I'm going to see how much I get to cover about radio spectrum, but in the water application, we think that one of the first steps is going to be politically and legally difficult. Right now, many of the water rights, instead of belonging to the users, such as farmers, belong to irrigation districts, to communities, and the irrigation districts have no interest in saving money or saving water. They can't use it for anything. Then we need an official public database of surface water property rights. Right now, it's hard to trade rights partly because they're unknown. We need to prepare and maintain an officially approved hydrological model, just as the FCC was able to say, you sir and you, he's complaining that he thinks there's interference. The FCC says, well, we measured it and our measurement stands. There's not enough interference for him to have a complaint. There needs to be somebody with the official authority to make a determination like that. In the paper I've published some additional solutions in case you can prove the agencies are wrong, but this would be the base case. We need to adopt recognized measures of consumptive use, like the OpenET example that I showed you. And then we need, property rights in the United States are constitutionally protected. You can't just take somebody's property rights. So the idea is to do what we did in radio spectrum, to make it voluntary, to offer a voluntary conversion from these use it or lose it relatively insecure rights where people are encouraged to waste water, because if you use less water, you lose your right to continue using it. And we want to convert those to secure, storable, tradable, consumptive rights instead of these diversion rights, but only in areas where there's, well, I won't get into the groundwater substitution problem. There's other problems about how surface water interacts with uses of groundwater. We don't want people selling the rights to river water and then pumping more water out of the already overdrawn aquifers. We've got to deal with that problem too. So those would be the key steps in market reform. And then the idea would be to conduct a procurement auction to buy initial conversions to maybe, so that maybe 50% of the users agreed. Remember, we didn't buy all the television stations. We had an auction going because some of the television stations were, the low value ones were agreeing to go off the air in exchange for payments. And that was the spectrum we were able to convert to make available for data. So this would be the steps to market reform. And then against the irrigation districts, the California law says that in order to maintain your rights, the water has to be put to beneficial use. You can't just spill it somewhere. And we would like beneficial use to be defined with respect to market prices. If the water is worth $100 an acre foot, or whatever it's worth, if it's worth $50 an acre foot, and you have a use that's valued at less than $25 an acre foot, you can't hold on to it and claim that's beneficial use, would be the idea. Again, to create a fire under the feet of some of the regulatory holdouts. So I didn't put in more about the about the radio spectrum. The idea is climate change is going to continue to disrupt water allocations. That's going to happen around the world. We do want to enable water markets, and at least in the jurisdictions I've studied, that's been a problem. Australia's active market has been shown to combat scarcity, improve allocation significantly, and the successful U.S. incentive auction, which cleared a lot of spectrum for mobile data use, can be a model for how you can restructure rights in a voluntary way without forcing or compelling the existing holders to give up property rights that we can't force them to give up, to build a well-functioning auction market with tradable rights. In the few moments that I have here, I might say that I think this is going to be really cheap to do if we can convince the right people. Imagine that you have rights to water. I'll talk a little bit more about some of the things that aren't on this slide. And, you know, I'm saying I'm going to give you consumptive use rights instead of the diversion rights that you have. You'll still be able to run your farm just the way you were before. But if you then go and save on water use, you can sell the excess and get some income for it. That provides an incentive for you and extra income for you too. And if you decide that you need bank financing to invest that irrigation improvement, you've got an asset you can mortgage because it's a tradable asset, the water rights, and you can go to the bank and get a loan against it. We think, you know, a lot of people will be willing to make that conversion for no price, If you save water because you've got plenty this year and you want to save for the future, you can tell the authorities to hold it in the reservoir and use it another year because it's your water, and you didn't have to use it to keep the rights. We think we'll get a lot better allocation from that. What else do I want to say about that? I guess I've mostly covered what I wanted to say. So thank you very much.